the law says, right? If you are a director, and if you are negotiating a business deal on behalf of the company, the rule is, the general rule is, you cannot take up that opportunity at a personal level at the expense and interest of the company. And when it comes to the no conflict rule, it means that if you are a director of the company, if you're trying to sell an asset to the company from one company to another company, you have to make disclosure. Now, once you have made that disclosure, you are still allowed to make that transaction. Okay? Providing that you have made the disclosure, you are, as a director, you are still allowed to sell your assets to the company. Now, when it comes to diversion of corporate opportunities, okay, what the court have held since Regal Hastings and Publicity is that, as I mentioned earlier, as a director, you must not make secret profit at the expense of the company. And this was also confirmed in an English case called the Buller Brothers. Now, what the court held in this case was, directors must avoid any possibility of a conflict of interest, particularly relating to corporate opportunities. Okay? Directors must avoid any possibility of a conflict of interest, particularly relating to corporate opportunities. Now, what happened in this case was, right, it was a family company owned by the Bullock family. And the kind of long story short, what happened was, the family later got into a quarrel. They got into a dispute. And one of the family members, while acting as a director and shareholder of the company, spotted a business opportunity. And as a result of that, he acquired the opportunity on his own and made a profit. And what the court held was, right, when it comes to corporate opportunities, particularly relating to corporate opportunities, directors must avoid any possibility of a conflict. And it was also confirmed in Hong Kong case for Chinese United Establishment Company versus Chen Xiaoqi. Now, but the question is, right, what if the other side, at the time of negotiation, did not say whether they would give the contract to the company? Okay, supposing in negotiating with as a director, if you were negotiating the business deal with the other side, let's suppose at the time the other side did not say whether they would give the opportunity to the company or not. And later, you leave the company and then contact the other party again at a personal level. Would you be held liable? Now, this was illustrated in a Hong Kong case called Kishimoto versus Akio Oba. Or as we call it, right, here in Hong Kong, the Kishimoto situation. Now, what happened in this case was, Mr. Oba, he was the former managing director of Kishimoto Hong Kong Limited. And Mr. Oba was principally responsible for a project whereby Kishimoto acted as the middleman in arranging the supply of LCD manufacturing equipment from Japan to another company in Taiwan. So the Hong Kong company, the Kishimoto Hong Kong company, was acting as a middleman to arrange supply from Japan to another company in Taiwan. Now, as the facts turn out, Mr. Oba and its Hong Kong office were initially successful in arranging the deal. Now, sometime in 1993, the Japanese head office decided that the project should now be handled by its Taiwan subsidiary rather than its Hong Kong subsidiary. And Mr. Oba became unhappy with that decision. And then he resigned from the company. Okay? So the Japanese head office now decides that this deal would now be handled by its Taiwan subsidiary and not its Hong Kong subsidiary, headed by Mr. Oba. So after learning this, he became unhappy and he resigned from the company. And then in September 1993, before his resignation actually took full effect, Mr. Oba acquired another company with the view to competing with Kishimoto once he resigned. So he set up another company, and the purpose was to compete with Kishimoto. And he lied to Kishimoto that he intended to go into the antique business. So when he resigned, he lied to his company that he was going into the antique business rather than the electronic business. So the question before the court was, right, in taking that deal, right, in taking that deal, was Mr. Oba liable for making a secret of it? Now what happened was, as the facts turn out, in December 1993, Mr. Oba managed to win the contract from the original Taiwanese customer that he formerly contracted with Kishimoto. Now, Kishimoto, in discovering this, brought an action against Mr. Oba for breach of fiduciary duty. So the issue was that Mr. Oba breached the fiduciary duty of no secret profit pool. Now, he lied to the company that he was going to the antique business. And then he set up a business, and then he went to the Taiwanese customer and got the contract. Now, the Court of Appeal held here, Mr. Oba was not in breach of fiduciary duty, okay? Mr. Oba was not in breach of fiduciary duty. Because at the time, based on the facts, the company, quote, did not have a maturing business opportunity. The company did not have a maturing business opportunity. Now, because according to the court, right, the reason why Kishimoto Hong Kong was able to win the first two contracts was because of Mr. Oba. Okay? Mr. Oba negotiated that on behalf of Kishimoto. But there was no guarantee that the Taiwanese customer would in future continue to use Kishimoto as their supplier. So in other words, according to the Court of Appeal, that was a non-maturing business opportunity. Okay? That was a non-maturing business opportunity. And according to Justice Litton, right, the project, quote, was at best prospective. The project was at best prospective, and there was no certainty that Kishimoto would have obtained the relevant contracts. So basically what this judgment is saying, right? Directors are only liable for breach of fiduciary duty if the business opportunity for the company had already matured. If the business opportunity of the company had already matured. So in other words, for example, right, if the contract between the company and the other party was about to be signed, or was concluded, and then the director diverts that corporate opportunity away from the company to itself, then that would be a breach of fiduciary duty. And that's why here in Hong Kong we call that the Kishimoto situation. Okay? So in other words, in determining whether the director is or is not liable, we first determine whether that business opportunity for the company had matured. Now, if the answer to that question is yes, okay, if the answer to that question is yes, then the director is likely to be held liable for breach of fiduciary duty. Otherwise, there is nothing to stop the relevant director from taking that opportunity away from the company at his own capacity. Now, in other words, okay, in part of the Commonwealth and also in Hong Kong, the more modern approach is that we now gradually move away from the rule decided by the House of Lords in Regal Hastings. Now, because the rule decided by the House of Lords in Regal Hastings was a strict one. The more modern approach is, number one, we look at whether there is a maturing business opportunity that the company already acquired. If the answer to that is no, there is nothing to stop the director, the relevant director, from taking up that deal at a personal level. So in other words, mere negotiating a business deal on behalf of the company, that by itself is not a maturing business opportunity belonging to a company. Because according to Gordon Kishimoto, right, there is nothing to suggest that the company will definitely win the contract. Now, if there's a conflict of interest and a secret profit case, right, how can a director absolve its liability? So how can a director be exonerated of its liability? Now, all that it requires is for the shareholders in general meeting to rectify that transaction by a simple majority. And was held in the case Banford versus Banford. And today, under our company ordinance, it is also provided under section 473, okay? Votes by a member who is also a director in respect of whose conduct the rectification is sought or related person or entities to be disregarded. So in other words, so long as the vote or rectification have been approved by the other directors that are independent of the deal or transaction, that rectification is valid. Okay, so long as the decision or transaction was rectified by the other independent directors or shareholders, the deal is valid and lawful. Make sense? Okay, is there any question in relation to director's duty? Now there's a reason, okay, why we spend 2 weeks on director's duty, okay? So make sure you know the answer by December, right? Okay, there's a reason, okay, why we spend 2 weeks on director's duty, right?